I never imagined my life would turn out this way. I grew up in a small Ohio town, married my high school sweetheart, and by the time I was 24, I had 2 kids and a mortgage. My husband, Mark, worked long shifts at the factory, and I picked up extra money doing food delivery. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on and gave us just enough breathing room that the kids didn't have to notice how tight things were. I told myself it was temporary, that soon Mark would get that promotion or I'd find something steadier. But the weeks turned into years. Driving around at night was lonely work. Most deliveries blurred together, fast food bags, tired families, drunk college kids, but I kept at it. Some nights the silence in the car was heavier than others. I'd catch myself staring at couples on porches or kids riding bikes before sunset, wishing I was home more. Then one night I got an order around 11:30. Nothing unusual, just a small dinner plate and a soda. The address was tucked down a street I didn't usually go. When I pulled up, the house looked plain enough, a little weathered, but not abandoned. I carried the bag to the door, rang the bell, and waited. He answered. The man wasn't striking in the traditional sense, but there was something about him that caught me. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair, sharp eyes, and this calm confidence that made me straighten up without realizing it. He smiled, slow and deliberate, like he already knew I'd be caught off guard. "Late night run?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. "Yeah," I said, handing over the food. "Keeps me busy." He teased me lightly about working too hard, and though it was the kind of thing plenty of customers said, it lingered with me all night. Driving home, I kept hearing his voice. By the time I crawled into bed next to Mark, I felt guilty for even remembering it. But then the next night, the same order came in, same time, same house, same man at the door. And I went. I started to expect it. By 10:30, I'd glance at my phone, waiting for the notification. Sure enough, by 11, there it was. The order. Always small, always simple, always his address. I never told my coworkers about it, though. Something in me knew it wasn't normal. The second week, he opened the door and leaned against the frame like we were old friends. "You work this late every night?" he asked. "Not every night. Depends," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Well, lucky me, I guess." That made me laugh, even though I knew I shouldn't. It was harmless at first. Just talking. I'd hand him the food, we'd chat for a few minutes, and then I'd leave. But little by little, I started looking forward to it too much. I'd put on lipstick before my shift, or wear the nicer jeans, even though Mark never noticed those details at home. One night, he stepped a little closer, so close I caught the faint smell of cologne and something warmer, like smoke. "You must get tired of knocking on doors all night," he said. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but yours isn't so bad." The way he smiled at that made my stomach twist. Mark was asleep when I came home that night, his hand draped over the edge of the bed, the kids' toys scattered in the living room. I stood there for a long time, staring at everything I had, everything I loved, and felt that deep, guilty pull toward something I didn't even understand yet. The line between work and him blurred. By the 3rd month, I couldn't pretend it was just small talk anymore. I lingered longer at his door. He invited me in once just for a glass of water, and I told myself it was nothing. But one glass turned into 2, and 2 turned into evenings where I stayed far too long. "Doesn't your husband wonder where you are?" he asked one night, tilting his head. I froze. I tell him I have long shifts. He smirked. "And he believes that?" I hated the way he made me admit things, but I also craved it, though. When we finally crossed the line, it wasn't some grand, passionate moment. It was quiet, deliberate, like we'd both been waiting for it. And afterward, driving home, my chest felt like it might crack open from the weight of what I'd done. The strangest part was that no one at work ever mentioned his orders. I checked the system once, scrolling through past deliveries, but his name and address weren't there. Only I ever seemed to get them. It nagged at me, but I pushed it aside. Maybe it was just a glitch. Still, sometimes when I drove by his street outside of work, the house looked empty. Dark windows, overgrown grass. I'd sit there for a minute, headlights off, heart pounding. But the next night, like clockwork, the order would ping my phone. And I always went. By then, I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. My shifts blurred into each other, the kids' laughter felt faint, and even Mark's presence at home seemed like a shadow. The man, my secret, filled every thought. One night after being with him, I stared at myself in the mirror, my hair messy, lipstick smudged, eyes hollow. I barely recognized the woman looking back. I whispered, "What are you doing?" But the silence offered no answer. Then came the morning I held the pregnancy test in my shaking hands. Positive. My knees nearly gave out. Mark was asleep down the hall, oblivious, and the kids were getting ready for school. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. It's not possible, I told myself, but deep down, I knew. The timing, the nights, the moments I couldn't undo. I drove by the house that day in broad daylight, desperate for clarity. But there was nothing. No car, no sound. The windows were boarded from the inside, dust layering the glass. It looked abandoned, like no one had lived there in years. Yet at 11 that night, my phone buzzed. Another order. Same house, same details. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't go. Not that night, but I couldn't sleep either, because I swore I heard knocking at the door. Faint, patient, waiting. The knocking didn't stop. Some nights it was louder, some nights softer, but I heard it all the same. Mark never seemed to notice. The kids slept through it. It was just me, wide awake, gripping the sheets, staring at the door. I stopped delivering after that, quit the job entirely. I told Mark I was burned out, needed to focus on the kids. He believed me, or at least pretended to. But the silence at night only made things worse. Weeks turned into months. My belly began to swell, and with it, the questions I couldn't answer. Whose child was I carrying? Was it possible I'd imagined everything? Was my mind breaking? One evening, Mark came home early and found me standing frozen by the window. "What are you looking at?" he asked. I didn't turn around. "Nothing," I said softly. "Just thought I heard something." But in the glass, reflected faintly, I swore I saw him. The man, standing at the edge of our yard, smiling. I blinked, and he was gone. Now, every night, I wait. The knocking doesn't always come, but when it does, my skin prickles and my chest tightens. I know I shouldn't answer. I know I should lock every door, board every window, run if I have to. But part of me wonders if he's really out there, wonders if he ever left at all, wonders what I've brought into this world. And some nights, when the house is still, I almost want to open the door. Temptation often begins in the smallest cracks of our lives, a late-night conversation, a lingering glance, a secret thrill. But left unchecked, those cracks widen into fractures that can destroy everything we've built. Love and loyalty are tested not when life is easy, but when it's lonely and uncertain. The choices we make in those quiet moments define who we are. And sometimes, the cost of chasing what feels exciting in the dark is losing what truly matters in the light. I used to think I'd seen enough blood to last me 2 lifetimes. I was 33 years old in the summer of 1982, a crime reporter by trade, and Chicago had already wrung me dry. I'd walked into alleys where bodies still bled, shaken hands with mothers whose children were zipped into bags and scribbled notes under the glow of squad car lights, while detectives muttered things no one was supposed to hear. It wore me down until every siren sounded the same. Every scream was just background noise. That's when Savannah called. The Herald wasn't much of a paper compared to the Tribune, but the editor promised me freedom, a bigger paycheck, and quieter nights. I told myself I'd take the deal. What I didn't say out loud was that my wife was gone. packed her bags, and left one rainy March morning, tired of waiting for me to come home from crime scenes. The apartment was a mausoleum after she left, just stacks of newspapers and ashtrays filling the silence. Savannah felt like an escape, but peace never came. The early 80s hit the South like a tidal wave. Cocaine money poured through the ports, and the city's glossy image of oak-lined streets and antebellum charm was a mask for turf wars and bodies washing up in canals. My first week there, I covered a drive-by outside a bar. 2 months later, a decapitated body was found in a drainage ditch. By October, I had a stack of notebooks filled with murders. I remember scribbling on the margin of one page, same darkness, different accents. I'd been in Savannah just over a year when Halloween 1983 rolled around. I wasn't covering the parties that night, just sitting in my cramped apartment drinking bad bourbon, listening to the Braves game on the radio. By morning, the story had already broken. Rebecca Lowe, 17, vanished after a costume party thrown at the estate of Harold Whitmore, the city's golden boy developer. His name was stamped on half the billboards in town. The girl's parents woke to an empty bed, her car still parked on the property. The cops assumed she wandered off drunk, maybe drowned in one of the man-made canals that ringed Whitmore's place. They sent divers. Nothing. Not a shoe, not a hair ribbon, not a body. Just rippling black water and excuses. That should have been the end of it. Another girl swallowed by a city that didn't like hard questions. But 3 nights later, she came crawling out of the woods barefoot on the side of I-95, clothes torn, body bruised, screaming like she'd been ripped out of hell. Rebecca Lowe was alive, but she was broken, and nothing Savannah whispered after that would ever sound the same to me again. I first saw Rebecca in the hospital, wrapped in blankets like a child, her eyes darting to corners as if shadows were waiting there. She didn't speak much, and when she did, it was in fragments. Darkroom, rope, voices. Sometimes she just screamed until the nurses sedated her. Her parents begged for privacy, but Harold Whitmore made sure everyone knew how generous he was being. He offered a reward for tips, promised to fund therapy for Rebecca, and even hinted that if I wanted to take a deeper look into the case, he'd give me access. That was the first time my gut twisted around his name. Men like him didn't open their doors unless they had something to hide. The police had their suspects. Rebecca's ex-boyfriend, a hot-headed linebacker who punched walls when he was jealous. A security guard who worked the night shift at the estate already on probation for theft. And then there was Ray Dalton, a drifter with a record for abduction, squatting in a shack near the property. Dalton was easy to pin it on. He smelled like cigarettes and unemployment, had no family, and more importantly, no money. I followed the leads. The ex-boyfriend cried when I pressed him, swearing he'd been home with his mother. The guard lawyered up. Dalton, though, stuck out. Neighbors whispered he stared too long at girls passing by, that he hung around places he didn't belong. He fit the story too neatly. By mid-November, deputies tracked him down. What should have been a routine questioning turned into a bloodbath. They claimed Dalton pulled a gun. They shot him 6 times in the chest and called it justice. The papers ran headlines. Savannah safe again. Case closed. But I didn't buy it. Dalton's neighbors swore up and down he'd been home the night Rebecca vanished. A week later, that same neighbor changed his story. When I asked why, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Then I found the footage. Grainy bar tape time-stamped during the abduction, showing Dalton at the counter nursing a beer. You couldn't see his face clearly, but his build and jacket were obvious. I brought it to the police. They shrugged. Whitmore's attorney dismissed it. Without a clear shot, it's inadmissible. I started feeling the weight pressing in. Dalton was a scapegoat, a body to bury the story. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized Whitmore wanted this finished, tied up and forgotten. I went back to Rebecca. She didn't want to talk, not to me, not to anyone, but sometimes silence cracks if you're patient enough. One afternoon, in a voice so thin I almost missed it, she said, "One of them smelled like cinnamon." It stopped me cold. Cinnamon wasn't in any report. It was too specific, too strange to be imagined. I pressed gently, but she shook her head, curling into herself. That was all she gave me. I carried it with me everywhere. Weeks later, I stumbled across a whisper about Whitmore's other child, Stephen. Most people didn't even know he existed. He was older than Rebecca, kept hidden, special in ways the family never explained. Guests at the party swore they saw him outside that night, talking to security, though the official line was that he stayed in his room. I tried calling Whitmore to ask about Stephen. The line went dead. When I pressed through his secretary, I was told in clipped tones, "Mr. Whitmore will not be commenting further." Still, pieces began to fit. Rebecca hadn't been chosen by chance. The party was a distraction, a mask. The timing, the silence, the protection, it all pointed back to that estate. It was months later, in a corner store of all places, when the last piece fell into place. I saw the Whitmore's housekeeper buying bags of cinnamon candies. The cashier laughed, saying, "Mr. Stevens' favorites." My stomach turned to lead. Cinnamon. That night I wrote until my fingers cramped. I had the outline of the truth. Whitmore's money had built the perfect wall around his son's sins, and Rebecca had been swallowed by it. Dalton was dead, the police were paid, and the city wanted to forget. But I couldn't. I brought everything to my editor. Tapes, notes, testimonies scribbled in shorthand, the cinnamon connection, even the whispers about Stephen. He leaned back in his chair, cigarette dangling from his lip. "It's explosive," he said, "but we'll need it airtight. Whitmore will come for us with everything he's got." We started drafting. I didn't sleep for days, too wired from the chase. I imagined Rebecca reading the story, maybe finding some measure of justice. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Then it crumbled. Whitmore bought a full-page advertising deal with the paper, a huge one, more money than the Herald had ever seen. My editor called me into his office looking like a man who'd been told to shoot his own dog. "The story's dead," he said. "I'm sorry." I fought. I shouted until my throat went raw, slammed my fist on the desk. None of it mattered. Money had spoken, and the presses stayed silent. That night I sat in my apartment with a gun on the table and a bottle of bourbon at my side. I'd stared down gangsters, corrupt cops, killers with knives, but nothing made me feel smaller than that check Whitmore signed. Rebecca faded into silence. Therapy bought with Whitmore money kept her quiet. The city moved on, polishing its image with ribbon cuttings and new developments. And me? I became the man who knew too much, but couldn't say a word. The years after blurred together. I kept writing, but the fire was gone. Every crime scene reminded me of the one I hadn't solved, the one I'd been forced to bury. My notes piled high, but the words felt hollow. I started sleeping with a gun in my nightstand, not because I expected someone to come for me, but because the paranoia gnawed at me. When you spend long enough staring into corruption, you start to wonder if it's staring back. Sometimes I'd see Rebecca in town, her hair longer, eyes dull, walking with her mother. She never looked at me, never spoke. I didn't blame her. I had failed her as much as anyone, and every so often I'd catch a whiff of cinnamon. In a store, in an office, in the air after someone opened a piece of candy. My throat would tighten, my heart race. It was like the city itself was taunting me. I wanted to believe truth wins eventually, that evil rots from the inside. But in Savannah, I learned the hard way. Money buries sins deeper than any grave. The Whitmores still built houses. Their names still shined on billboards. Stephen still lived behind his father's shadow, shielded from consequence. And me, Michael Turner, the man who once thought crime reporting could shine a light into dark corners. I realized I was just documenting shadows. Savannah didn't need a reporter like me. It needed an undertaker. Evil often hides behind polished faces, wealth, and influence. The world teaches us that justice is blind, but in truth it can be bought, bent, and buried. The lesson isn't just about corruption. It's about the cost of silence. Every time we allow power to smother truth, We abandon the vulnerable like Rebecca to their pain. The greatest danger isn't the darkness itself. It's when good people grow tired of fighting it. I never thought the summer of 2017 would leave me with memories I still carry like scars. Back then I was 22, stuck in a small Alabama town where the nights were humid, heavy, and quiet in a way that felt unnatural once the clock passed midnight. I worked at a grocery store on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and steady was enough. My mom's medical bills were stacking up, and every extra hour mattered. When management looked around for someone to cover the night shift, my name always came up. I was quiet, didn't complain, and never made waves. That made me reliable in their eyes, but really it made me disposable. The shift started at 10. Most nights I stocked shelves, swept floors, and, when it was my turn, hauled carts back from the lot. I hated the carts the most. They collected in the shadows between trucks, in the corners where the cameras never worked. The lot lights hummed above, throwing pale circles of safety, but the dark between them felt endless. I carried a small flashlight clipped to my hip, a habit since my brother was mugged years earlier walking home from his late shift. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, though deep down I trusted it more than I trusted the company's broken security. That night in late July, the air was thick enough to taste. My manager told me the other cart guy had called out sick. "You're covering," he muttered, eyes on his clipboard. I didn't argue. I never did. By 11:45, I had finished one row and headed toward the far end of the lot, where smaller carts usually hid. Trucks loomed around me like walls, the shadows stretching long. I pushed the cart line forward, the wheels clattering loud in the stillness. That's when I noticed him. A man on a bike, coasting slow, coming straight my way. At first I thought he was just another drifter. People grabbed carts at night to carry their bags or bottles. Annoying but harmless. I kept my head down and tugged another cart loose. But when he reached the corral, something shifted. He pedaled straight into the gap, stopping where he blocked my only exit. The sight froze me. His stare was sharp, unblinking, fixed on me like I wasn't a person, but a target. "Hey there," he said, voice stretched and low. My grip tightened on the carts. "I work here," I muttered. "You need to move." He smirked, leaning on his handlebars, sweat shining on his face. His eyes were too wide, jittery, like someone burning on adrenaline. The parking lot suddenly felt smaller, boxed in by cars and silence. I thought about running, but he was too close. If I tried to slip past, he could grab me in a heartbeat. Seconds dragged. My flashlight beam caught his face, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. Not boredom, not curiosity, but intent. "You scared?" he asked. I swallowed hard. My voice cracked when I answered. "Just leave me alone." His smirk twitched. He leaned closer, ready to push forward. Every nerve in me screamed. I braced myself, ready to shove the carts into him and run. My chest pounded so loud I barely heard the sudden roar behind me. Shouts, engines, commands. "Drop it! Hands up!" The night erupted. Cruisers swarmed the lot, red and blue lights flashing against chrome bumpers and asphalt. Doors flung open, officers yelling commands over each other. For a heartbeat, I couldn't tell if they were pointing their rifles at him or at me. The man sneered, cursed, and pedaled forward like the voices didn't matter. My body locked up. I threw my hands into the air, shouting, "I work here, I work here." But my voice drowned in the chaos. "Step away from him," an officer barked. I stumbled sideways, almost tripping over a cart before bolting toward the side entrance. My legs shook so badly I could barely run, but adrenaline carried me. I pushed through the door, chest heaving, air conditioning blasting cold against my sweat. Inside, Marcus, my coworker in frozen foods, looked up, wide-eyed. "Kayla, what the hell happened?" I couldn't answer, my throat locked. A woman rushed in behind me, breathless. I recognized her from earlier in the bread aisle. "That's him," she gasped. "He robbed us, me and my mom, across the street. He had a gun. He took everything." My knees buckled. I slid down against the freezer doors, tears burning hot. The room spun. The man outside hadn't just been lingering, he'd already hurt people, and I'd been seconds away from being next. Marcus crouched beside me, steadying my shoulder. "You're safe now. Just breathe," he said, voice stripped of its usual sarcasm. But his words couldn't touch the fear still crawling under my skin. The officers stayed until after midnight, taking statements, searching the lot. They found the man's gun loaded, tucked in his backpack. He hadn't fired it, but that didn't comfort me. I sat in the break room, trembling, while the store manager asked half-hearted questions. "You hurt?" he finally asked. I shook my head, and he sighed in relief. Not for me, but because it meant no paperwork. "Clock back in then," he said. "We still need the shelves stocked." That was it. No concern, no apology, not even a word of thanks. Just a reminder that my safety didn't matter. Only the job did. But the job didn't matter to me anymore. I'd already turned in my 2-week notice the day before. I was tired of being treated like furniture. Tonight was the breaking point. I pulled my apron over my head, laid it on the counter, and walked away. Marcus followed me outside. "You're serious?" he asked. "I can't stay here," I said, my voice raw. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Can't blame you." I drove home with white knuckles on the wheel. Every set of headlights in the rear view felt like him chasing me. Every shadow on the roadside seemed ready to step forward. When I finally reached my driveway, I sat in the car long after the engine stopped, listening to the silence press in. I never returned to that store. The next morning, Marcus texted me that the man was booked into county jail, charged with armed robbery and assault. People around town whispered about it for days, telling each other I was lucky, even brave. Brave. The word didn't fit. I hadn't felt brave. I'd felt small, cornered, waiting to be swallowed. What haunted me wasn't the man himself. It was the way management brushed it off, like my near miss didn't matter. If I'd been hurt, they'd have filled my shift before the blood dried. That realization stayed with me long after the police report faded into memory. I picked up a new job a month later, smaller hours, but safer. I never worked another overnight alone, but I still keep that flashlight in my purse. I clip it to my side every time I walk through a parking lot at night. It's not just habit anymore. It's a reminder. The reminder that danger doesn't only come from the shadows. Sometimes it comes from people who look you in the eye and decide your safety isn't worth the effort. What I learned that night was simple. No paycheck is worth your life. If a job leaves you exposed, unheard, or treated as disposable, you owe it to yourself to walk away. Shadows can hide threats, but indifference is just as dangerous. Value your safety, demand respect, and remember, silence and obedience don't make you safe. Courage sometimes means leaving, and no one should ever make you believe you're replaceable. I never pictured myself as the kind of person who'd end up working nights at a gas station, but life has a way of humbling you. My name's Eli Turner. In the fall of 2019, I was 25, living in a small town outside Toledo, Ohio, and already feeling like I'd used up most of my chances. I'd dropped out of college 2 years earlier, weighed down by student debt and bills I couldn't keep up with. I promised myself I'd figure it out, but what I figured out was that rent didn't wait for anyone. The gas station wasn't supposed to be permanent. None of it was. I told myself the job would last a few months, just enough to catch my breath. But temporary things have a way of becoming routine. I was nearly a year in by the time the night I'm about to tell you happened. The place itself was a small 24-hour station on the edge of the highway, the kind of spot truckers and late-night travelers used out of necessity, not choice. We had 2 pumps, a tiny convenience store with buzzing fluorescent lights, and a coffee station that always smelled faintly burnt no matter how many times we scrubbed it. People called it a graveyard shift trap. Low pay, long hours, higher risks. If it weren't for Sam, I don't know how I would have lasted. Samantha Rivera, Everyone called her Sam, was my co-worker on nights. We weren't official, not really, but there was something there. She was smart, funny in this dry way that made long shifts bearable, and she had a patience I envied. Anyone who looked close enough could see how we leaned into each other when the nights got slow. It was unspoken, but real. Most nights were boring, stretched out hours of stocking shelves, refilling coffee, and trying not to fall asleep on the counter. The occasional drunk customer or cranky trucker broke the monotony, but nothing worse than a raised voice or someone trying to pump gas with a 20 they didn't have. But autumn brought longer nights, and with it, a kind of silence that pressed down heavier than before. The fields outside town filled with fog that crept onto the road, wrapping the station in gray. It gave the place a trapped feeling, like the world shrank to our 4 glass walls. I thought I'd gotten used to it. I thought I could handle whatever wandered in off the highway, until that night proved me wrong. It was 2:07 in the morning. I know because I glanced at the glowing clock on the register while stacking cartons of cigarettes behind the counter. Sam was wiping down the coffee station, humming under her breath. The station was still just the neon open sign buzzing in the window, the kind of quiet that made your ears strain for something. That's when headlights cut across the lot. A car rolled in, slow, deliberate, pulling up to the farthest pump. The engine cut off, headlights blinked out, and then nothing. Nobody got out. I felt it before I could explain it, the wrongness of that silence. Usually people stepped out, swiped their card, fueled, and left. This stillness stretched too long. I glanced at Sam. She glanced back. We didn't need words. We both knew. "Maybe they're counting cash," she whispered, though her voice carried a thread of unease. Finally, the door opened. A man climbed out, hood up, hands buried in the sweatshirt pocket. He didn't head for the pump. He walked straight inside. The bell above the door chimed sharp in the silence. He didn't greet us, didn't nod, didn't even look directly at us. His eyes flicked over the aisles, scanning like he was searching for something invisible. I forced a friendly tone, though my throat was dry. "Evening. Need help finding something?" No answer. He walked past the counter straight to the back where the coolers hummed and stopped. Too long, just standing there, staring like he'd forgotten what he came for. Sam edged closer to me, her shoulder brushing mine. After what felt like forever, he turned and walked out. No words, no purchases. Just the door chime and silence again. Sam exhaled hard, half laugh, half nervous. Creeps me out more when they don't say anything. I nodded, pretending I agreed, but something in my chest stayed tight. People came and went all night, but something about him was different. Like he hadn't come for gas or snacks or coffee, he'd come for us. Minutes later, the bell chimed again. The same man walked back in. This time, he didn't bother pretending. He stood in the middle of the store, lifted his left hand and curled 2 fingers toward us in a "come here" motion. His right hand never left his sweatshirt pocket. My blood ran cold. "Come here," he muttered, low but clear. Sam froze, her knuckles whitening on the counter edge. I whispered, "Lock it." Together, we rushed to the entrance, shoving the bolt down just as he reached it. The metal clunk echoed too loud in the silence. He grabbed the handle, yanking. Locked. The harsh lights caught his face as his hood slipped back slightly. Pale, tight skin, wild eyes darting. His pocket bulged, and the shape pressing through the fabric was wrong. Angular. A knife? A screwdriver? We couldn't tell. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the glass until his breath fogged it. Then he smiled. Not wide, not theatrical, just enough to make the skin on my arms prickle. Sam whispered, "Don't look at him." But I couldn't help it. My eyes stayed locked. He started to laugh, a low, private chuckle, like we were the punchline to a joke he'd already decided. Then, bang. His palm slammed against the glass. Again. louder. Each hit rattled the frame, echoing through the quiet station like gunshots. Instinctively, I reached under the counter and grabbed Sam's hand. She squeezed back, grounding me even as fear pressed into my ribs. He didn't leave. He paced the lot, circling the pumps, checking side windows, then returning to slam the glass again. Once he tugged something metallic halfway out of his pocket, enough for the light to catch, before shoving it back. We stayed behind the counter, silent, every second crawling. And through it all, I realized something worse than fear itself. He wasn't in a hurry. He had time, and we were trapped. When headlights swept across the lot, relief hit so hard I nearly choked on it. Another car pulled in, a tired-looking guy stepping out to fuel up. The hooded man froze, then slipped back into his car at the far pump. He didn't leave. He just sat there, watching. The customer came inside, jingling change in his pocket, oblivious to the predator parked outside. Sam forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Coffee's fresh," she said, hands trembling as she bagged a candy bar. I kept glancing past his shoulder, terrified the hooded man would charge in again. But he didn't. Not with another witness there. When the customer left, the hooded man's engine stayed silent. His car remained parked, dark, patient, like he was waiting for the moment we'd have to step out. We didn't call the cops. Looking back, maybe we should have, but in the moment, fear froze logic. What would we even say? A guy stood outside and scared us? It sounded weak, flimsy. So instead, we waited, clinging to the hope that daylight would chase him away. Hours crawled. Sam restocked shelves with trembling hands. I sat behind the counter, staring at the dark shape of his car. Every time I blinked, I saw his smile pressed against the glass. By the time the first gray light of dawn crept across the sky, his car was still there. My shift ended at 6. Sam's too. We'd have to leave eventually. At 6 sharp, we clocked out. The lot was still cloaked in fog, the hooded man's car parked where it had been for hours. My chest tightened as I walked Sam to her car, each step slow, deliberate. Our hands brushed, then locked together without thinking. Neither of us spoke. We stopped near her door. I could feel her pulse through her palm, quick as mine. She unlocked her car, slid in and shut the door. I stood there watching until her taillights disappeared into the gray. Only then did I exhale, a shaky breath that felt like it emptied months out of me. I drove home after, eyes glued to my mirrors the whole way. The car didn't follow, but the feeling did. Even in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replayed every detail. His hood, his stare, the way he never actually tried to rob us. That was what haunted me most. He hadn't asked for money. He hadn't demanded anything. He'd just wanted us cornered, afraid, on display. And lying there, I realized the scariest monsters aren't the ones who steal or strike. They're the ones who wait outside the glass, smiling, knowing you can't escape. Sometimes danger doesn't always come with demands. Sometimes it's not about money or violence. It's about control, fear, and power. You can prepare for thieves. You can protect against loss. But how do you protect against someone who enjoys seeing you trapped? The truth is, no job, no paycheck, is worth risking your safety. When you sense something's wrong, trust it. Protect yourself first, because the people who sign your checks won't be the ones standing between you and the glass when the night turns dark. My name is Derek Miles, and in the winter of 2021 I was 29 and working nights at a discount store in Cincinnati. It wasn't the kind of job you brag about. The pay was barely enough. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees, and the customers who drifted in after midnight were either half asleep, half drunk, or half crazy. Still, I stuck with it. After my dad passed, I had to step up. My younger sister needed help with rent, and I couldn't afford to be picky. I told myself the night shift wasn't all bad. Less traffic, fewer supervisors breathing down my neck, and the quiet gave me space to think. But that quiet had a way of getting under my skin. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, the kind that makes your thoughts echo too loud. I'd push a mop down the long aisles and feel like I was the last person alive in the world. The store wasn't in the best neighborhood either. We had regular shoplifters, the occasional fight in the parking lot, and more than a few nights where someone would wander in talking to themselves. Corporate still kept the doors open 24/7, insisting night shoppers are loyal customers. What they really meant was that money spent at 3 in the morning was still money. We were just the warm bodies they threw at the dark hours. By the time February rolled in, the winter nights cut through the skin like knives. The cold made the city streets look emptier, lonelier. Around midnight, fog drifted off the river and pressed against the glass doors of the store, making it look like the outside world had been erased. I kept humming to myself just to feel less alone. That night started like any other. I had my mop bucket near the toiletries aisle, dragging it across the linoleum, watching the water smear into pale streaks under the buzzing lights. It was 12:30 on the dot when I noticed him. A tall man, broad shoulders, standing half-hidden at the end of the aisle, grinning at me. At first I thought maybe he was just some restless customer, maybe drunk or high, nothing unusual. But he didn't move. His smile didn't change. He just stared like he had all the time in the world. I stopped mid-swipe, leaning on the mop handle. "Can I help you find something?" I asked, my voice trying for calm but cracking halfway through. Nothing. No nod, no shrug, no response at all. He just stood there, grin plastered on his face like a mask. I forced myself to keep moving, ducking into the next aisle. My chest tightened as I pushed the mop forward, telling myself not to overreact. Creeps came through all the time. Usually, if you ignored them, they drifted back out into the night. But when I turned the corner, my stomach dropped. There he was again. Same grin, same unblinking eyes. He was waiting for me. A shiver ran through me. I gripped the mop handle like a weapon, trying to act casual. "Store's open if you need something," I said, backing toward the front. He didn't follow, but his eyes stayed locked on me. I made it back to the counter, pretending to check the register. The aisles looked empty again. I told myself he must have slipped out. The bell on the door hadn't chimed, but maybe I missed it. My nerves were frayed, my imagination filling in shadows where there weren't any. Minutes passed. The cameras flickered on the monitor above me, aisles stretching out empty. I let out a shaky breath, thinking the guy was gone. I started counting down the hours until 6 a.m., already planning how I'd crash into bed. That's when I felt it. A sudden splash of warmth across my leg. Sticky, wet. My body locked. My first thought was that I'd been stabbed, and the panic hit before my brain caught up. I looked down, expecting to see blood, but what I saw was worse. Thick red streaks stained my pants. I spun around, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The man was inches behind me. He zipped his pants with one hand, laughing this low, guttural cackle that twisted my stomach. "You sick—" The words tore out of me before I could stop them. I stumbled back, shoving the mop bucket aside, bile burning in my throat. He laughed harder, stepping close enough I could smell the stench of him. His breath reeked, his grin wider now, eyes gleaming like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Rage cut through my fear. My hands shook as I yanked my phone from my pocket. Without thinking, I hit record and pointed it at him. "Get out," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Get the hell out." He shoved me hard into the shelf, knocking boxes of paper towels onto the floor. "Get out of my way," he hissed, his grin twisting into something uglier. Then he bolted. Adrenaline took over. I chased after him, my phone still recording. "You're not getting away," I screamed, my voice raw, echoing through the empty store. He crashed through the sliding doors, sprinting across the parking lot. I followed just far enough to catch him under the streetlight. For a split second, his face was clear. Sharp features, hollow eyes, the grin finally gone. Then he vanished into the dark, swallowed by the night. I stood there, chest heaving, frozen. My leg was sticky, my hands trembling so bad I nearly dropped the phone. The cold air bit at my skin, but I barely felt it. When I staggered back inside, my manager was finally emerging from the office, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" he asked, confused by the noise. I shoved my phone in his face, my words shaking. "Call the cops. Now. Look what he did." The police arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing against the glass front of the store. 2 officers came in, their voices calm, steady, but their eyes betrayed how disturbed they were when I showed them the footage. I explained everything, my voice stumbling over itself. The way he'd grinned, how he'd appeared in 2 aisles like he was waiting, the splash on my leg, his laugh. My hands shook the entire time. I couldn't stop looking at the streaks on my pants, the way the fabric clung to my skin. The officers assured me I'd done the right thing recording him. They promised the footage would help. They took statements, asked about the store's cameras, scribbled notes. By morning, the video was out. I hadn't meant for it to spread, just sent it to the police and my sister. But someone online picked it up, and from there it was wildfire. Outrage poured in from strangers, then locals, then people with big followings. News outlets picked it up within the day. The man was recognized almost immediately. A repeat offender, a long record of public indecency and assault charges. Under pressure, he turned himself in 3 days later. Justice, in a way, was served. But even after the relief, something stayed with me. At home, I scrubbed at my leg until my skin burned raw. The phantom feeling clung to me, like no amount of soap could wash it off. Nights blurred together. I avoided gas stations, grocery stores, anywhere with long aisles and too much silence. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw his grin. I quit the discount store not long after. Not because of him, he was behind bars, but because I realized I'd never feel safe in those aisles again. Every squeak of the mop, every flicker of the lights, every empty stretch of shelving reminded me of that night. I couldn't breathe in there without my chest tightening. My manager didn't fight me on it. He just nodded, muttered something about corporate liability, and filled my shifts with someone else. To him, it was just an inconvenience. To me, it was the line I couldn't cross anymore. Even now, years later, I still carry it. I avoid night shifts. I walk faster through parking lots. I keep my phone ready to record, like it's a weapon. Some people tell me it was just one man, just one incident, but they don't understand. It wasn't about one man. It was about what the night revealed. The store wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by the monsters who walked in smiling, waiting for silence to turn into opportunity. And I learned the hard way that sometimes the scariest thing isn't the violence itself. It's the laugh, the grin, the way they look at you like you're nothing more than their momentary amusement. That's what stays. That's what haunts. Safety is fragile, and danger doesn't always announce itself with threats or weapons. Sometimes it comes in the form of a smile, a laugh, a silence that waits until you let your guard down. No job is worth more than your sense of safety. If you feel the wrongness in your gut, trust it. Speak up. Walk away. Because the world isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by people who show you what they really are when no one else is watching. I never thought working nights at a pharmacy would change the way I looked at people, but it did. When I first started at ClearMed Pharmacy in Charleston, South Carolina, I figured it was temporary. I was 24 then, fresh out of college, chasing the idea of management training and career growth. By 27, I was still stuck behind that counter on the overnight shift, bagging cold medicine and stocking shelves while everyone else slept. I kept telling myself it was worth it. Management liked to hint that dedication mattered, that the employees who took the graveyard hours were the backbone of the company. Truth was, I was exhausted most days, but rent wasn't getting cheaper, and I had student loans chewing through my bank account. So I showed up every night, swallowing the silence like it was medicine. Charleston has 2 sides. The postcards show cobblestone streets, pastel houses, and fancy restaurants that serve shrimp and grits for $40 a plate. But when the sun goes down, You see the other side. Empty sidewalks. Strangers wandering aimlessly. Bars bleeding drunk people into the streets until 2 a.m. The pharmacy sat right on the edge of that divide. We were the safe glow of fluorescent lights in a strip mall surrounded by shadows. I told myself the quiet was a blessing. No screaming kids, no endless rush. Just me, the hum of the cooler, and the faint buzz of the overhead lights. I even learned to like it. I could catch up on organizing beauty supplies, sneak in a podcast, or scroll through my phone when it slowed down. But quiet doesn't always mean safe. That September night in 2022 started like all the others. A few stragglers came in for Advil, some guy bought a 6-pack of energy drinks, and a woman dropped off a late-night prescription. By 12:10 a.m., the store was empty again. I leaned behind the counter, charging my phone, when I noticed a new voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was nothing but static and broken voices like the radio hadn't tuned right. Spam, I thought, and tossed the phone aside. Then came the texts. Call me back. I know where you are. When's your shift over? At first I laughed. Probably some wrong number, maybe a drunk texting the wrong person. But as I stared at those words glowing on the screen, the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight. I typed back, "Who is this?" My hands were trembling, though I tried to tell myself it was nothing. The little typing bubble appeared, flickered, then vanished. No reply. I shoved my phone in my pocket and went back to work. The best cure for nerves is keeping busy, right? I grabbed a box of pain relievers and wheeled a cart toward aisle 6. The shelves needed restocking anyway. Around 12:45, the front door chime rang. I peeked up from the aisle, expecting to see someone wandering toward the back. Nobody. The door had opened, but the store was empty. I stood there for a long moment, my heart thudding. Finally, I shrugged it off. Maybe a draft triggered it. Maybe the sensor was going bad. At 1:30, another message lit my screen. I'm here. That one punched me in the gut. I dialed the number immediately, heart pounding. Somewhere in the store, faint and muffled, I heard a ringtone, my own call echoing back at me. My throat tightened. Someone was inside. I hung up fast, every sound in the store suddenly magnified. The buzz of the lights, the hum of the coolers, my own uneven breathing. I tried to steady myself and pushed the cart slowly toward the beauty aisle, like I was just doing my job. That's when I saw her. She was crouched in the corner of the next aisle, mid-30s maybe, long dark hair hanging in front of her face. She pretended to be looking at makeup, but her movements were stiff, too deliberate. Do you need help finding something? I asked, my voice catching halfway through. She didn't answer, didn't even glance up, just crouched there, hands twitching slightly. I backed away, returning to the counter as fast as I could without running. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Look behind the shelf. My eyes darted up. Through the tiny gap in the shelves, she was peeking. Kneeling low, eyes locked directly on me. My chest tightened. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend, whispering what was happening. She laughed nervously. Maybe it's just some creep. Call the cops if you're scared. I wanted to believe her, but then the woman stepped out fully and my blood ran cold. Her face didn't look right. At first I thought it was smeared lipstick, but then I saw the cuts, long deep slices running from the corners of her mouth outward. Blood dripped down her chin, glistening under the fluorescent lights. And she was smiling. A thin, grotesque grin stretched wide by those wounds. Her eyes were glassy, distant, yet locked on me. Then she giggled. It started as a muffled chuckle and rose into a pitch that made my skin crawl. I knew that laugh. Years ago, I'd been harassed online by a woman who created fake profiles, messaging me day and night. At first, it was flirty, then obsessive, then threatening. She called herself your shadow. When I blocked her, she made new accounts. I reported everything, and eventually, the messages stopped. Someone told me later she'd been hospitalized. And now she was here. Stay away, I shouted, grabbing a pair of scissors from the counter. My hands shook so hard the blades clattered. "I'll call the cops right now." The woman tilted her head but didn't move closer. She just whispered, her bloody grin twitching. "Shift ends soon." I wanted to scream. Instead, I bolted toward the back, crouching between shelves, gripping my phone so tight my knuckles ached. The store was too quiet. Every shadow stretched too far. Then, the door chime. I froze. Silence followed. When I finally gathered the courage to peek around the aisle, the woman was gone. I called the police with shaking hands. 20 minutes felt like hours before they showed up. 2 officers swept the aisles, checked the footage, even replayed the door chime recording. I showed them the texts, the number, every detail I could remember. They looked sympathetic, but tired. The kind of tired you get from too many late-night calls. "We'll follow up," one said. "We'll patrol the area. For now, block the number and call us if anything else happens." When they left, I stood alone in that store, the lights buzzing overhead, the aisles stretching out like tunnels. The scissors were still on the counter, but they felt useless now. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, crouched somewhere I couldn't see, smiling just out of reach. The next few nights blurred together. I kept showing up, but sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her crouched in the aisle, blood dripping, smiling like she had all the time in the world. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was some stranger with a cruel streak, but my gut knew better. That giggle, that whisper, it was her. I started carrying pepper spray in my apron pocket. The scissors stayed under the register. I double-checked the locks, made sure the back door was bolted, and kept the lights as bright as possible. Still, the messages didn't stop. New numbers, same words. "You can't hide. I know your shift. Smile for me." One night around 2 a.m., a coworker dropped by unexpectedly to grab her paycheck. When she came through the door, I nearly screamed. She laughed when she saw the scissors on the counter. "What, you planning to stab a shoplifter?" I forced a smile. Something like that. But the truth was, I didn't trust anyone anymore. Every customer felt like a threat. Every aisle held shadows too long, too deep. I'd catch glimpses on the cameras. Something moving just out of frame, a blur near the door, a flicker of hair in the beauty aisle. The police called once, told me they traced the number but couldn't confirm a location. Whoever it was used burner phones, disposable, untraceable. "You're safe," they said, but safety felt like a joke. One morning, as I was leaving, I found a folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. My name, written in red marker. Inside, a single sentence. "You looked pretty scared last night." I sat in my car shaking, staring at those words until the sun came up. I quit 2 weeks later. It wasn't sudden. I tried to hold on, kept telling myself I needed the money, that I couldn't run from fear. But fear has a way of gnawing at you until you can't think straight. By the time I gave my notice, I was living in survival mode. The manager tried to convince me to stay. "We can transfer you to another location, maybe change your hours." But nights had already stained me. I couldn't look at the fluorescent glow without hearing that giggle. I couldn't stock beauty products without imagining her crouched, watching. The last shift was the hardest. I kept my phone on silent, afraid of what message might come through. Every time the door chime rang, I flinched. At 7 a.m., I walked out without looking back. It's been over a year now. I moved apartments, switched jobs, cut ties with that chapter of my life. But some nights when I walk into a store alone, I still feel it. That weight, that sense that someone is crouched just out of sight smiling, waiting. I never did learn what happened to her. Maybe she's still out there, drifting between shadows, looking for another night shift light to step into. Maybe she's closer than I want to believe. What I know is this. Fear doesn't always come from the dark itself. Sometimes it comes from the fact that people can carry obsession for years, waiting until the right moment to remind you they haven't forgotten. The night taught me a truth I wish I'd learned earlier. Safety is never guaranteed. Not in brightly lit stores, not behind counters, not even with locks and cameras. We put faith in routines, in alarms, in the idea that police can always protect us. But real safety starts with recognizing when something isn't right and trusting yourself enough to walk away. No job, no paycheck, is worth ignoring the warning signs your gut is screaming at you.